We are now in section 5, the partners and suppliers dimension for the deployment management practice. There will be 2 Bloom's level 2 questions from this portion in the exam, meaning these will be 2 understanding questions only. The exam syllabus is to understand the roles of partners and suppliers in this practice, and particularly the dependencies of the practice on third parties and how the partners and suppliers can support this practice. So it's generally a straightforward lesson, but let's go through this. First of all, some general comments. Every organization needs to understand how they are dependent on third-party components and how they aim to establish effective and efficient collaboration with their key suppliers and partners around various activities. And one of them could be the deployment management practice activities. Because vendors may perform activities from various practices rather than limiting only to one specific practice. When there are multiple suppliers, it is important to understand what each supplier does, what is the scope and boundary for the work they will do for the organization, and in this case, particularly for the deployment activities, and how the various suppliers and the organization will interact with each other. Another thing to consider is that organizations have a process for deployment because it's a key practice in digital organizations, and such organizations use standard tools, detailed procedures to ensure consistent deployment of software. And because they would have different environments such as development, testing, staging, production, there would be different processes for these environments, deployment processes, that is. And many of the practice activities would be enabled by external resources through the partners and suppliers. And this can include not only people, but also tools, processes, and other capabilities. Therefore, it'll be good to understand what all are possible from the partners and suppliers. Such partners and suppliers can help to enhance the practice and its practice success factors. And again, we have to look at 4 different sourcing areas from the 4 different dimensions. So if you look at the people area, where the deployment management activities are manual, then resources could be sourced from the partner. And when doing this, it is important to consider the schedule of deployments, the availability of internal resources, meaning they would not be so much available, the cost of the external resources, and so on. When it comes to technical or non-technical skills and capabilities, they also need to be considered during the sourcing decisions. For example, which specific skills need to be sourced? Are these technical skills only, such as specific system skills, technology platform skills, or are these non-technical as well? For example, planning, governance, execution capabilities, because all these are necessary in deployment management. And in the modern digital world, there is complexity of the technical or service environments. The technology environments are also changing rapidly. And because of which there could be lack of internal resources. It's also possible that the entire deployment management practice may be outsourced to a partner. A partner would be needed rather than a normal vendor or supplier, because more closer collaboration is essential when the entire practice is outsourced, and a high level of trust is needed between both the organization and their partners. And then last but not the least, tools and technologies is another sourcing area wherein the partners and suppliers can help with the supply of the tools and technologies, but also they may help in integration of the tools. And let's look at some of these on the forthcoming slides. So therefore, now that we have seen some general considerations for outsourcing to third parties, let's look specifically at what all partners and suppliers may perform for the organization. So they may support the development, management, and execution of the deployment management practice. And these can include, specifically for the deployment management activities, these can be the deployment and automation activities, so which can be quite a lot of activities. This is where the third parties need to integrate well with the organization. They need to be compliant with the organization's policies and methods of deployment, release, service validation and testing, software development, information exchange, and so on. But how are these defined and where are they defined? Meaning the supplier's ways of working. These need to be described at various levels in the strategy itself, the deployment strategy, that is, in the deployment practice methods and procedures, and in those value streams where deployment management is contributing. Then even the means of effective collaboration, and not only how the third parties are involved, should be documented in the strategy, practice methods and procedures, and value streams. Once value streams are defined, or meaning whenever a single value stream is defined, then the third-party dependencies need to be clearly understood during the various service building, testing, and deployment activities. Further, when performing deployment management activities for the partners and suppliers, they need to be standard interfaces for communications so that the suppliers fit properly into the organization's overall ecosystem. What we mean here is that there can be certain rules of data exchange, certain tools and processes that will enable a common language between the organization and their third parties, common practices, meaning methods, that is, and good collaboration on the value streams in a multi-vendor environment. It is important not to be too bureaucratic because for faster and more effective delivery of hardware and software in the live environment, because deployment is always followed by release. And so organizations need to have closer cooperation with their partners and suppliers, and they can do so by removing formal bureaucratic barriers whenever they communicate, collaborate, and make decisions.